Hello and welcome to Town Talk. I'm your host, Rose Highland-Sharpe. This very inspirational program is brought to you by Highland Communications for storytelling, edutainment, music, and much more. Call at 910-528-0718. This is Rose Highland-Sharpe. Stay tuned for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's Black Pioneers Dinner and Panel Discussion, October 2022. At UNC Black Alumni Reunion. Video per Michael Washington, UNC Class of 2009. Editing for YouTube per Rose Highland-Sharpe, UNC Class of 1980. Enjoy the very moving, inspiring stories of our fellow UNC alumni.
Good evening and welcome to the 2022 UNC Black Pioneer Dinner. Thank you, really, sincerely, thank you for braving this tropical storm. I call it a hurricane, but y'all can call it what you want, to come out tonight. And thank you also to those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live. As I am sure even those of you who do not know Walter Jackson or me have realized by now, I'm not Walter Jackson. My name is Edith Hubbard, and I am a Black pioneer who graduated in 1966, and I served on the planning committee for this dinner. Unfortunately, Judge Donnie Hoover, who is our Black Pioneer Dinner Chair, has experienced a medical emergency and cannot be with us this evening. We send our prayers and best wishes to Judge Hoover and his wife, Josephine. In Judge Hoover's absence, Black Pioneer Chair Walter Jackson will facilitate our panel discussion this evening, and I have stepped in to fill the role he was to take as Master of Ceremonies. It is what it is. Tonight, the Black Pioneers celebrate ourselves and each other. For those of you who might not know, the Black Pioneers represent the first generation of Black students at Carolina. And for those of you who entered in 1951, most as a result of the court order to the class of 1972. We are proud of our role in breaking down racial barriers here at UNC and opening the doors to thousands of Black students who have followed us. We know that you were not the first to have the intellectual ability to succeed at Carolina, nor the first to have the courage to attend here. But we were the ones who were there and willing to step up when the walls of resistance finally started to give way. By and large, we are now thankful for the opportunity to attend the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and for the subsequent blessings that have helped us to bring such joy to subsequent students coming here. Tonight, you will hear from three distinguished Black pioneers who might or might not be representatives of the entire Black pioneer population. Oh, I would have done this so differently. And you can hear firsthand some of their thoughts. We are sure that you will enjoy this evening, and we thank you again for registering for the dinner and coming out in this weather. Hugh Holston, who was a star last night and the night before, has another engagement in this weather that he has to be to. So we're going to kind of switch the program around a little bit. So I yield.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Great. Good evening, good evening. My name is Hugh Holston. I currently serve as the chair of the 2022 Black Alumni Reunion Committee, and I'm awfully excited to be here for a variety of reasons. One is, this is an event that we worked with Mr. Walter Jackson on as chair of the Black Pioneer Dinner, but also just from the simple standpoint that as a graduate of a 1982 graduate of UNC-Chapel Hill, I realized that I stand on the shoulders of you all who started in 1951 through 1972, and I'm so proud of what you did to make sure that those of us like me had the opportunity to come to Chapel Hill. Many of us think that we did it all by ourselves, we did it all alone, but I know that's not the truth. Last night we had our Light on the Hill Scholarship Banquet, and we honored the Golden Rams. That is the 50-year anniversary graduation, and the class of 1972 is, I believe, the last class of the Black Pioneers. And if you're here, please stand up and let's give them a hand for their... Are you here? Thank you, guys. So on behalf of the Black Alumni Reunion Committee, I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome. You're always welcome. There are many of us who have inquired about how do we become Black pioneers. Is there a way that you can take that 1972 and move it out a couple of years, because you are revered amongst the Black alumni at Chapel Hill, and I don't hear any takers yet, so it sounds like 72 is going to be that year. But again, I want to welcome you to the weekend. We have a lot of great events planned. There's some going on right now. Of course, obviously, we have the football game and tailgate tomorrow. We have the evening events at the Sheraton Hotel on Saturday evening. And then on Sunday, we have the inspirational service and also the KBIC program. And we want you all to participate and attend. I do want to extend the condolences and prayers for Judge Hoover and his family to make sure that they have the strength. We're going to pray, keep them prayed up. And with that, I'll say thank you so very much for having me, and go Heels. Thank you.
Now let's move on this evening, beginning with the invocation. Led by Black pioneer Otto White, class of 1965. Otto.
Thank you, Edith. Let us pray. O merciful and gracious God, we pray that you are in the midst of this gathering as we fellowship with UNC Black pioneers who participated in the journey to make this institution the University of the People. More than 3 years before Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat in Birmingham, African Americans began a journey to integrate the University of North Carolina. God's presence in that struggle is evidenced by the life and contribution of those who participated in the process. We are thankful for the courage and pioneering effort in which Black pioneers experienced in surviving the segregated barriers and racist obstacles that existed on this campus during their tenure at Chapel Hill. Many of these African Americans received their UNC education during the periods of no Black professors, no Black counselors, no Black mentors, no Black athletes, no Black fraternities or sororities, and in many cases, no other Black students in their classes. Most Black pioneers had to resist racial and societal barriers to their being here. Many were academic stars in their communities and came from humble, segregated beginnings to study at this world-renowned institution. God, with your guidance, help us to use this opportunity to recommit ourselves to ensure that our pains and sacrifices were not in vain, and that we individually and corporately continued the pioneering efforts to make the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill the university of all the people. Amen. They also have me listed to give the blessing, so let's give the blessing. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for the food that we're about to partake, those who prepared the food and those who partake of it. This we ask in your holy name to be gracious to us. Amen. If you turn to the back of your program, we're going to sing Lift Every Voice, okay? Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the sleeping skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has on us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
I witnessed this panel of prominent Carolina graduates and think about others who were along with us, many of them here in this audience, others of whom were not. I just sort of say, man, how did I get in with this group? This very distinguished group of panelists. Let me introduce them to you. I'm going to start, and there are bios in your program, of course. I'm going to start on the far left with Dr. Curtin Johnson. Dr. Johnson is, among other things, one of the founders of the UNC's Black Student Movement and the very first editor of the BSM newsletter, Black Ink. Moving on, we have Dr. Well, that first doctor was not a medical doctor. The second one is Dr. Joanne A.P. Wilson. Dr. Wilson is professor of medicine in the Duke University School of Medicine, a gastroenterologist, whatever that means. And she was one of the first African-American females to graduate from UNC, graduated in 1969, just a couple of years after me. And then we have the Honorable Melvin Watt, former U.S. representative, my Carolina classmate, a man who brings great pride to the Black pioneer community. And of course, he's also been a state representative and the head of a federal government agency. I'm not going to try to give bios again. You have their bios in your written material. I'm going to throw out sort of an opening question and invite each of them to come up to the podium and share just a little bit about themselves, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And that's not a lot of time to share when you have such an impressive background and long history as these 3 people. So I'm going to ask them to make an opening statement. Then after they each have made an opening statement, perhaps I'll have a question or 2 for them. And I'll bet a lot of you have questions you would like to ask, and you would rather ask your questions than hear my questions. So perhaps I'll distribute some paper and ask you that if you have a question you'd like to put to one of the panelists or all 3 of them, that you write your question and give it back to me, and I will ask it of them, and among other things, that will keep people from doing as they often like to do during question and answer sessions and getting up and making speeches. So first of all then, I'm going to invite Dr. Johnson. Dr. Curtin Johnson, if you would please And the same applies to the other two of you when your turn comes. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you happened to come to Carolina, what your experience here was like in terms of the good, the bad, and ugly, and just a little bit about your subsequent life. That's a lot for 5 minutes or so, but see what you can squeeze into 5 minutes. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my colleagues in Carolina Blue. It's good to be among you pioneers at the University of North Carolina. So I'm humbled to be here and invited tonight to share with you. Since the time is limited, I'll cut to the chase. Why UNC? Well, my daddy wouldn't let me go to Howard, and Shaw gave me a full scholarship, but I didn't want to stay home. I applied to A&T, but I didn't want to go there because my sister was Omega Queen or something up there, and I would have been in her shadow. So, and I didn't like Moo U. Y'all know what Moo U is? Yeah, I didn't care much for Moo U. So it might really have been because Charlie Scott started playing to tweak my interest. The first one in the ACC, I believe. So that might have been it, but sounded like a good choice to get out of town. So Judge Hoover, who was in my class, asked me to say a few words about my experience. It was kind of an eclectic experience. It was all over the map. And it wasn't all bad. It was a lot of good. It was a mix. I remember Wayne Herder, who was editor of the Daily Tar Heel, invited me to be news editor of the Summer Tar Heel with him. And I was one of the first African Americans to serve on that capacity. I sang on the choir, the Carolina choir. Dr. Laura Hargett. I don't know whether you remember that name, but I had to audition for that, and I'm no solo voice. All you had to do is stay on tune and on pitch. So I made that. I had a white female African history professor that tweaked my interest in going back to the continent. I said, if she can know that much about Africa, I want to know myself. I said, she shouldn't know more than I know. But she tweaked my interest. So those are just a few of the things that I would mention. I was in the J School. Dean John Adams, who was the dean of journalism school, helped me get an American newspaper publisher's scholarship in my junior year, which helped me finish out my time in Carolina. So there were some good sides. Of course, there was the Black student movement, and if there's something that was a downer, it was basically the fact that I felt so isolated when I came to Carolina. I felt isolated. I was walking in a fog. So many people. I had a white roommate who was a senior, which we figured at that time, if you're a senior and you got to have an unknown roommate come in, you must not have a lot going on. But he was a good guy. He didn't bother me, but we didn't interact that much outside of the room itself. So I was isolated. And the person that really came to me was another kid from Raleigh that I knew, but he kept me in trouble. He wanted to go downtown and shoplift. So the good Lord kept me out of trouble. And to make it short, because my 5 minutes is going to be up after a while, I found the Black student movement in '67, and I was a member, and in '69, Jack McLean was here last night for the previous. Jack McLean was the BSM president before I was president. I look up to Jack McLean. I wish he was here tonight. He should have been getting that award I got last night. But that's why I give tribute to those guys, because Jack McLean, Philip McAlpin's here tonight. Raise your hand, Philip. It's not many of us here tonight from that. Amen. I have photocopies of the first 2 issues of Black Ink if anybody wants to see it before you go, if you've never seen one. But we printed it in '69, November and December, and we covered the cafeteria workers' strike. We covered Black Monday, where students came from A&T and from Shaw and from Central and from other campuses to help us in the strike. They came in, some of them on U-Hauls, in the back of U-Haul trucks. And so one thing I learned that was so positive from it, cafeteria workers helped me learn how to help working people. How to help working people. And that's real important because that carried over to my experience at First Baptist Church, where I served for 28 years, where we collaborated with the Smithfield, not the Food Workers Union, and the workers at Smithfield packing plant, the world's largest hog processing plant, largest one in the world in Tar Heel, North Carolina. And for 3 years, of course they had been fighting before that, we had services and we worked with the union and the workers, and they finally won a union at that plant. The first at a plant like that in North Carolina. So the things I learned at Carolina in protest and in advocacy and in sometimes getting in trouble like John Lewis said. And by the way, I was arrested with John Lewis at the South African Embassy. Of course, you know that they let you out after a day. But still, that was a great time, sitting there with John Lewis locked up, and he's telling you about the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So many things. I was a bodyguard for Stokely Carmichael. So my wife said, "You were crazy, weren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I was crazy." And why was I crazy? Because I found out stuff that you didn't get in the history books. I found out stuff about myself that let me know that I had a great history, that I came from kings and queens, Timbuktu, and from Benin, and from some of the early civilizations that we don't hear much about. And when I found out how great my history was, I had a little anger bubbling up in me. Why was this kept from me? Why was it withheld from me? And so I had to make sure that future generations, as much as possible, would know that there's somebody, they have a history, they have a culture, they're just not post-slavery, but you have a history biblically, you have a history in the great civilizations, you have a history with kings and queens, and know that you're somebody, because that shapes your future. That shapes your future. So I'll wrap it up right there. But I give honor to my wife, who put up with me for 49 years. Amen. Raise your hand, honey. So yes. So if anybody says anything ugly about me, you know where she is, so she won't hear it. But she's been a wonder. And my daddy taught me a poem that has gone with me. Dare to do right, dare to be true. Failings of other men will never save you. Stand by your conscience, your honor, your faith. Stand like a hero and fight until death. God bless you now.
That's going to be a hard act to follow. Dr. Joanne Wilson.
That's quite a speaker to follow. I'm Joanne Wilson. I'm a professor of medicine at Duke for 36 years. I am a gastroenterologist, and I see a lot of people in this room that have seen people like me. And they're getting younger, 45 now to start. I am a graduate class of 1969. I always like to add that I'm a mother of 3, I'm the grandmother of 4, they all live in this area, and I'm a wife of 53 years, Ken Wilson there, class of 1970. coworkers, we actually met at Lenore Hall. It's a great meeting place. Hookup site on campus. The new one. For me, Carolina was an incredible place. I had thought that I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was in middle school. I went to parochial school and I saw these nuns that were riding through Africa, they were saving lives. I decided I wanted to be a nun and a doctor. In high school, I dropped the nun part, but kept the doctor part. And then I went to high school, and I still was trying to figure this all out. I told my dad I was going to join the military, and then I could go to college and medical school in GI Bill. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and they were going to parochial school, and I said, they need their foundation, so I won't take their money. And Daddy, who was a Navy veteran, said, no way. And so then it's the rest to figure out how to get this all done. I did get accepted to colleges, one prestigious Northeast college, but they sort of gave me a full ride, quote unquote, which meant loan and working in a cafeteria. If you're from Raleigh, I am a Peebles. All through high school, I worked 16 hours a week at Peebles Grill, Saturday and Sunday. And I'd waited enough tables to, not wait any more tables. I looked at Carolina, and as I said, I was in parochial schools, so there were a couple of Catholic colleges and women's colleges, but Carolina was really an awesome place. I didn't really know that mine would be one of the first classes that they admitted women as freshmen. So in my class, there were 2,300 people, 300 women, 2 African-American women, myself and Laverne Peace, who lived in town and didn't live on campus, and 6 guys that were somewhere over the south campus that we never saw. So it was real, but I got an awesome education, bar none. I came with that goal of going to medical school. And I thought initially I'd work in a lab or something, this whole idea of trying to save money, because if you come from the South, sharecropper families, and poor families, you don't ever borrow money, because you know you got to pay it back sooner or later of some sort of way. But Carolina was doable with scholarships with summer jobs and so forth. But it was an awesome education. I was introduced to a world that I did not know. I'd only driven with the family to the Bronx and to DC, and that's all I knew. But I met people who'd been all over the world. I think he talked about a professor tweaking the interest in Africa. I was a science kind of person, so the chemistry professors, I got some of the most supportive people I've ever been introduced to. Once they sort of knew you were serious about the situation, which almost all the African American students here were very serious because it had been a long road to get there. One of the things that also I found excellent was roommates. I had a great roommate my freshman year, whose dad was a professor over the state, and actually the summer after my freshman year offered me a job in the lab. It was working with trees, mind you, because he was in the school of the forestry, but it was still real lab work, which I'd never done before. The second thing was just being, as I said, introduced to all these people. I joined the Y Committee for International Students, tour around campus, and it was really fascinating for me. The second thing, as I said, I met some really great people, including my husband, and we got married right after college, while he was still in college. And one of the things that I understood from Carolina was I had the confidence to do a lot of things that I had no idea that I'd be able to do. Once the education was such that you could really count on it. Now, I think the same as you, I found some of the most difficult times was, I said a culture of singularity, stress of singularity. You were the only person around, so you did not. And then the second thing is that I didn't get to do a lot of the things with the student movements. If you're a science major, you burn 8 hours a week in labs. There's not a lot of people there. as I was a BS Chem major at Carolina, so that's a lot of labs and all kinds of different things. So you really don't get a chance to hang out with a lot of people. And the second was the stressors of the civil rights movement, the strike with the cafeteria workers, and I felt a real alliance with the cafeteria because they've been so wonderful to me. I ate all of my meals at the cafeteria. If you were trying to do a budget, 25 cents for breakfast, 25 cents for lunch, and 50 cents for dinner. That was mine. I didn't have any, because this was money I'd made, and I was counting the pennies, and so they were counting on seeing me pretty much every day, except maybe a couple times a year. But that, and then also I had a bunch of friends that were involved with the Vietnam War resistance as well. So we had a lot of things going on at campus, but I think that it taught us a lot about the world and the injustices and so forth. And the last thing I wanted to add was that for me was that the education gave me an opportunity to go on to other things. Acceptances to prestigious medical schools in the Northeast, which I turned down in order to get married and stay here. But there was two great schools here, which a lot of people did not realize that they were, nothing you gave up going to these schools. And to prove that point, frequently many of us have done that over and over again. The second thing was I can support Carolina for future generations. Our daughter is a Carolina grad. She was a Moorhead Scholar, which obviously none of us could have done then. From gender or race, there were no Moorhead Scholars. And so our daughter's a Moorhead Scholar. I had another niece who was a Poe Scholar. She was a few years older than my daughter. And then, amazingly, her son is now a freshman at Carolina. He's all academic, all American lacrosse player. So he's the African American lacrosse recruit. Look out for Hayden Downs. I'm just putting, he's from Atlanta, but he's an awesome lacrosse player who was all everything in that. So, but this is the kind of thing that this kind of education can do for everyone. And you see the people here, and there's hundreds and hundreds more all out there that we run into every day with this kind. And, I thank the people of North Carolina for supporting the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Excuse me, I had to point out somebody who worked on the black ink this year. She was on my staff. The Honorable Angela Bryan, who was on the Board of Governors, stand up. She was on the black ink.
I've just got to say a few more words about Mel. He and I, Congressman Watt, he and I started Carolina together. So I have known him and Dr. Wilson since way back when. Of course, I call them by their first names because we go way back to when we were freshmen, and I was a junior and she was a freshman. But tonight, I'm going to give them the respect of calling them by their proper titles. I just met Dr. Johnson last year. But I want to share this little bit about Congressman Watt with you. People used to tell me when they saw me after many years, well, Walter, you haven't changed. And I felt good about that until one day I heard somebody say, if you go through 4 years of college and it doesn't change you, that's no compliment to you. Congressman Watt has not changed since the day I met him. We lost touch for many years, and at some point in my career, after he had been elected to Congress and I was working in the corporate world, I think in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or someplace like that, I had a chance to go to Washington and to visit him in his congressional office. It was going to be the first time I had seen him in many years. And I thought, wow, is he going to come out acting like some big stuffed shirt or whatever? So I sat patiently waiting for a while until he was able to come out, and he walks out, Walt Jackson! Same bell. So it is indeed an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to present to you my friend, Congressman Melvin Watt. Give him hell, man.
I better start, since both of you all introduced your spouse. I don't want to get in trouble because I got to go home tonight. If we make it to November 25, it'll be 55 years. Wow. Yeah, stand up. To the same woman. I have to make that clear. Sometimes when people say they've been married for 55 years, not necessarily to the same person. Anyway, so Donnie gave me a different set of instructions because he told me I was to talk about only my time at Chapel Hill. And I'm actually happy that I'm going last because I'm delighted to know that in the 2 years or 3 years or 4 years after me, some people came and can say something good about their time at Chapel Hill. I've had very little good to say about my time at Chapel Hill. Even when I got the Davy Award, they were surprised that I was very honest about my experience at Chapel Hill. So what I thought I would do, for 77 years now, as of August 26, for 77 years I have been living an autobiography. After 19 years of education, formal education, and 22 years of practicing law, and 21 years of practicing politics, and 5 years of practicing bureaucracy, I finally decided it was time to start writing the autobiography. So I thought I would read three passages, 3 parts, and actually I've planted a question in the audience that might allow me to read a 4th part, and these are actual writings from the draft. Who knows when it will ever be published? Maybe never, but I had to get it off my chest. So this section, the first section, is called A Different Campaign. And here's what I've written. As 1 million or more people were gathering on August 28, 1963, for the March on Washington to campaign against racism and inequality, I was packing and getting ready for an orientation that would be the start of my own personal campaign, a campaign of direct competition against white students for the first time in my life. It didn't take long for it to become obvious that my personal campaign, like the one taking place in Washington, was going to be a campaign against hate and racism, perhaps even a campaign for survival. My personal campaign started on a hot Sunday afternoon, just one day after the March on Washington, almost as soon as I set foot on UNC's campus. By the time I arrived on the 3rd floor of Lewis Dormitory, 3 of the 4 beds were neatly made, and 3 of the 4 desks were filled with pictures of white families that I assumed were families of the students who would be my roommates. By the time I returned from doing some preliminary paperwork at UNC's South Building, however, all 3 desks and beds had been vacated. I never even got to meet 2 of the 3 white boys assigned to room with me. I met the 3rd one only after hearing his father scream at him through a phone in the middle of the hall, "Get the hell out of the room with that nigger." At least he tried to explain before he departed that, although he had grown up in New Jersey, his father was from Mississippi. In 1963, no further explanation was needed. My first thought was that I would finally have a room to myself for the first time ever. However, a cascade of other reactions quickly followed. Confusion, fear initially, followed by anger. As soon as I saw Mama's car pull away from campus to head home, I ran to the room I had to myself and cried myself into the kind of anger that led me to a new resolve. From that day forward, I always had the right of way on every sidewalk and corridor on campus. I required every white person in my path to step aside. I had officially resolved to be angry and confrontational, but I had also resolved to compete, succeed, and survive. Page 65, 66. So now I go to another little, this is several pages later. The challenges for black students at UNC were not limited to those in the dorms or in the classrooms. UNC and Chapel Hill were not exempt from what was going on in the rest of the world. Sit-in demonstrations started by students from North Carolina A&T University and Bennett College in Greensboro in 1960 had spread to college campuses and communities throughout the South. Throughout my first year at UNC, demonstrations were going on almost daily in the streets, restaurants, and other public accommodations in and around Chapel Hill. And the demonstrations left black students with a wrenching dilemma. Either repress or defer our desire to be activist demonstrators to get a college education, or get actively involved in the demonstrations. The demonstration versus education dilemma seemed especially personal to me, perhaps because it seemed to me to be the same dilemma I had seen my older brother face 4 years earlier. I recall clearly how Mama had begged him to stay out of the sit-ins and demonstrations, only to turn on the television at night and see him front and center in the news coverage. I also recall the sadness and frustration Mama had expressed when he finally admitted, weeks after he had already stopped going to classes, that he had dropped out of college to spend more time actively involved in the demonstrations. From Mama's perspective, his decision had left him with just 2 options: either work in a warehouse the rest of his life or join the military. 2 additional factors seemed to make my dilemma even more vexing than the one my brother had faced. First, I knew that the $10 per week commitment I had talked Mama into making was a huge sacrifice for her from the $63 weekly minimum wage salary she earned, and that my failure to stay in college would mean wasting her sacrifice. Second, my decision to enroll at North Carolina's flagship university at a time when only a few black students were being admitted seemed to carry with it an implicit obligation for me to put education first to help pave the way for other black students to follow. As Eddie Hoover was paving the way for me, raise your hand, Eddie. As Eddie Hoover was paving the way for me, I felt I had an obligation to do the same for other black students who would follow. Hey. Of course, the dilemma I faced was not unique to me. It was the perplexing and unfortunate dilemma facing every black student who had been admitted to previously segregated white colleges and universities throughout the South during those turbulent years. In my class at UNC, the number of black students was just 13 or 17, depending on who you believed, of approximately 1,800 students. Admitted in 1963. Campus-wide, the total number of black students was estimated, perhaps generously, at just 77 out of more than 20,000 students enrolled as undergraduate, graduate, and professional school students. For undergraduate students, a rule that required class attendance and mandated a failing grade for students who missed more than 3 classes during a semester made it nearly impossible to be a regular participant in civil rights demonstrations and still meet the attendance requirement. The news spread fast every time one of our black classmates was arrested and ended up in jail, and when some of them were declared, quote, academically ineligible to return at the end of the school year, usually because they had not met the class attendance requirement. The most disappointing blow to me personally came when I learned that my friend and classmate, Ronnie Ross, had been declared academically ineligible. I had considered Ronnie the most gifted black student admitted to UNC in 1963. To my mind, he was nothing less than brilliant. He had graduated high in his class from Charlotte's best black school, West Charlotte High School. He had been admitted to UNC after finishing as one of the top 3 high school students in North Carolina statewide academic math and physics contest, and correctly answering all the questions posed to the top 3 students during an oral challenge in Chapel Hill. He had easily placed into UNC's most advanced math and physics courses based on his college placement test. During the first year at UNC, he had done well on every test and had scored 97 on the final exam in calculus. I was devastated when I heard that he had been declared academically ineligible after failing too many courses because his involvement in the demonstrations had made it impossible for him to meet the class attendance requirement. The news added to my fear and anxiety, but it also added to my anger and to my growing commitment to stay the course and excel academically. After much soul searching, I decided that being a student while I had the opportunity and concentrating my energy on getting an education and excelling academically would prepare me for the possibility to become a much more effective activist in the years that followed. And one final excerpt from later in this same time. There's a lot. 4 years at Chapel Hill had a big impact on me, as you can tell. I was fortunate that I had Eddie Hoover to turn to for pep talks when I was feeling down, and that most of the few black males at Carolina met up at the gym every Friday afternoon to play basketball, form bonds of friendship, and support each other emotionally. I knew every black student's name and family history, but we were all scattered in dormitories throughout the campus, and each of us suffered from being alone, detached, and insecure in one way or another. We were all fighting to compete and survive while dealing with regular racial insults and trauma with no institutional support. I relied on Eddie Hoover especially, and it gave me comfort to know that his fight to survive and excel academically was as lonely and as scary as mine. As the old saying goes, misery loves company. In many ways, Eddie's family history mirrored mine, and I knew he was totally focused on becoming a doctor, despite growing up poor on a farm and without any family members or friends to shape that aspiration. Like me, Eddie had never run from hard work or challenges. We had different majors and lived on opposite sides of the campus, but he always seemed to be around when I needed him most. On one occasion, when I was feeling down about the hard routine required to compete academically, Eddie told me a story that I have never forgotten. He said he had left the library late one night, headed for his dormitory, one of the high-rise dorms located on the fringe of the campus beyond the football field, when he looked up and saw lights glowing brightly in all the dorm rooms on that end of the campus. He suddenly found himself walking fast, then jogging, then running faster and faster, and starting to sweat as his legs and feet ended up in a full sprint. He said that he had finally realized that his imagination was telling him that every light he saw in a dorm room in the distance was a light in the room of a white student studying intently and getting ahead of him academically. He wanted urgently to get back to his dorm to study, to keep from losing ground to the white students. Eddie's story reminded me much of the feeling I had experienced when my new white roommate first moved in, and I had tried to study at my desk for as long as he studied at his. At that time, I had viewed him subconsciously as a representative of the white students I had to compete against, and I never wanted any white student to study longer or harder than I did. Both Eddie and I had experienced the irrational emotional impact that having to compete constantly against white people can have, even on rational black minds.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Wilson, Congressman Watt. There is so much there that could be followed up on. I really don't know where to start or where I could start. Congressman Watt mentioned perhaps having planted a question in the audience. Judge, I'm subbing for Judge Hoover, who as no, you're subbing for me. And Judge Hoover had planted, had asked me to ask this question for him. It's perhaps not the best follow-up to these home runs that have just been hit over the fence. But what Judge Hoover said was that he and his brother, Dr. Eddie Hoover, and I, and probably Otto White, by the way, let me just put a pin in it and recognize first Otto White and Dr. Eddie Hoover, a UNC class of 1965 Black pioneers. If you would, please. Anyone here from the class of 66, 67, other than Mel and me, 68, 69? I'm sorry.
Story of my life.
Curtis Mayfield had a song, "Woman, You're Too Slow." You're too slow. Please. My good friend, Edith Hubbard, class of 66. Thank you. 60, where were we? 68, 69, 70, 71, and any 72s here? All right, wonderful. Let's give all the Black pioneers a hand. Okay, Judge Hoover wanted me to ask each of you, he said, those of us from the earliest years came from all Black environments. Most of us, Dr. Wilson is shaking her hand, which I think signifies, well, not me. But so I'll pose this question to Dr. Johnson and Congressman Watt. Dr. Johnson, did you attend all Black schools before coming to Carolina?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so Judge Hoover's question was, what was it like for you to be sitting in a class with whites for the first time, and probably the only Black student in the class? I think we can just about assume that in every case that was the case.
Okay. I'm going to be real brief because I'm going to be the politician on this one. I'm going to answer your question. It wasn't that difficult for me because I left John W. Ligon Junior Senior High School in my sophomore year. Freedom of choice sent me to an integrated school, Enloe High School. So I experienced the all-Black experience, but I had a chance to get into that competition at Enloe, and I rather enjoyed it because I whipped butt. But just to turn it around as a politician and then hand off the mic, one thing I'll never forget, his name was James Cates, right? Who was murdered by not skinheads, but white nationalist supremacists on the campus in front of the Union. The pit, we called it. And I'm just brief. I'll never forget coming up to the pit because that was a celebration that night. I came late, an hour after he had been slashed by a machete. And I saw blood all over the bricks and the steps and the pit where he had been killed. And I'll never forget saying to myself, that could have been me. But by the grace of God, there have been many instances at Carolina that could have been me. But I sometimes suppress them and can't conjure them up. But I just wanted to share that with you. So I understand there's going to be a memorial for Brother Cates, and I hope all of us will support that. Thank you.
I think I've already responded to that. The irrational competition, everybody, I've written about it. One of these days, maybe you'll get a chance to read the whole story, because I write about that too. I mean, it was irrational, and at that time it was just irrational.
I guess I wouldn't call it irrational. I would call it inexperience. I mean, because I think that this is what I want for the students of today, to not be in that situation. I mean, what happened to me was I was in the parochial school system, and the schools integrated. I went to Cardinal Gibbons Memorial out in Raleigh, and subsequently have been on the board of that. But my class had only 32 kids, and there were 4 African-American kids in the class. But we all 4 had gone to grade school together, and the other kids, a lot of them had gone to grade school together. But you, having experience at 13 and 14 is much easier for a lot of kids than having experience after you've been, at the top of the class and kind of not know where you're going to be. And I think that that's critical. We have worked hard with our kids and worked with other kids to make sure they have that experience. Dr. Hoover and I do that, and we had our medical students work with kids in Durham to make sure that they can have some of these experiences. The thing that I find most troubling now is the resegregation of schools. Because I don't think that, I mean, the kids somehow get an idea of who they are from what they've done. I mean, I came to Carolina in a different situation. I finished valedictorian class. And so I had been taught by teachers who were some of the best in the country I think. Because I had a chemistry teacher in high school with a PhD. I mean, not many kids anywhere in North Carolina had that. And my parents didn't pay a bunch of money for it, $10 a kid per month, which is a lot back then, but they paid. And I think one of the things you were saying, disappointing, the thing that I had from my dad in an 8th grade education was one of the smartest people I ever knew. But he said, if you say you're going to do something, do it, and I know you can. And that was the kind of lesson that I had. He was a plasterer, he wasn't the lawyer, he wasn't any of the big wigs. I'm from the People's Family of Raleigh, which goes again from all kinds of people. But the thing is that many of the people sort of said that, and I think that somehow at places like Carolina, even the schools now, I was on the then and now panel for UNC students, and there were students from all different areas. And I was troubled to find that some of the students that came after me in the 80s and so forth had felt so isolated, so unsupported in their education and with the people that helped them. And that was really, to me, most troubling, that the same things that many people back in the 60s and the 70s had faced was like being redone, totally redone. People were ending up in totally where they couldn't see that I'm as good as that person, academically, whatever, socially, whatever, and that they couldn't see that. And that's the big trouble for me. But it's just having that little bit of experience when you come into the situation is enough to make a huge difference in how and you don't suffer, because that is suffering, and it totally takes your outlook on it 50 plus years later. That doesn't mean. I was lucky, even though there's only, you're in a dorm of 300 people, and there's one African, they put the freshmen separate from everybody else, and there's one out of the 300. I mean, that's, but. And one story I did not tell is in my freshman year, I got called into the Dean of Women's office. There was a Dean of Women's, young people, separate. And all of my class, people in the dorm said, oh my God, why did she get called? It was around the dorm. Why? The woman I always said, the woman asked me, she said, are you working?
Just a little, I got a text message saying you weren't quite loud enough, so speak, hold the mic a little closer, please.
She said, are you working too hard? Are you working too hard? And I said, there were two things that I think tempered her. I was going, to a little high school that they didn't give much credence to. She didn't know the things that she'd done PhD and so forth. And I said, no, I'm not working too hard. I said, I got a lot of time here. I don't have to work 16 hours a week in a restaurant. I help put dinner on the table, 7 kids, and everything else. But it was just that idea that there were other women that were excellent students, but the fact that the black kid was, it must be that you're staying up to 24 hours, you're working 24 hours a day studying or something. And I think that that was the whole impression, and the hope that I had was in the future that you recognize that the African American student or student from wherever could do as well as the next student. I'm sorry for being long-winded.
Obviously, what we have here is a fascinating conversation that could go on for hours. I've got 2 questions from the audience, and I have one more that I'm going to throw out to you all. And we're right about the appointed time, although I did indicate to you that we might run a little longer than the appointed time. So first, let me ask my additional question, then I'll ask these 2 questions, and then possibly 1 or 2 more from the floor, so to speak. So, this theme of isolation came out loud and clear in listening to you all. And the challenge that many of us face between how much of my time and energy do I devote to the classroom versus do I devote time and energy and risk my education by being more deeply involved in the struggle? Because this was the height of the civil rights era when we were at Carolina. And by the way, there was a radical change apparently from 1967 when I graduated and the fall of 1967 when a bunch of young Turks came in and established the Black Student Movement, because we weren't thinking about anything like the Black Student Movement. We were so busy trying to graduate that that kind of thing just wasn't on our radar screen. So if you would please speak to how you balanced the struggle between how you spent your time with regard to academics and the pull of being involved in the civil rights movement.
I have to say, for me, it wasn't a matter of choosing. It was not either or, both and. Because one went to your heart. And without the one, the other became less significant. And the academics, without a social consciousness, was empty. It was empty. So yes, my grades suffered for the first 2 years until I got out of science and math and got into my journalism. But I made it to my journalism major. But the isolation, the BSM really helped that. We didn't have fraternity. We didn't have sororities. As far as I was concerned, I was a student of Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta and not Greeks, to be honest with you. Nothing against Greeks. My wife is a Greek. But that wasn't my thing. That wasn't our thing. We didn't even want a fraternity on campus at the time. We wanted BSM. That was family. And I'm glad to see Eddie Hoover here because Judge Hoover was in my class. And to give you one example, I'll shut up. The BSM was where I found out all the kids were talking about Donnie Hoover. He went out there and tried out for football on Bill Dooley's football team. Wasn't no blacks on Bill Dooley's football team at the time. But you know what Donnie Hoover did? He broke Bill Dooley's tackling sled. And if any of you all play football, a tackling sled is made out of metal. You don't break those things. That's just how bad and strong Donnie Hoover was. He was stronger than anybody else on that Carolina team, but they never took him on. He was trying out. But he was a tough dude. And then when we would get slights like that, we come lick each other's wounds. We comfort one another. We'd meet in the student union and have a hamburger and things like that. And that was our family. That held us together. That moved us forward. That gave us breath and strength to speak to power and stand in front of Lenore Hall with canes in our hands in front of the Highway Patrol and the Carver and Chapel Hill Police after we had torn up Lenore Hall dining hall, stood there with canes in our hand, and they didn't bother us because they thought we had swords in the canes. But we didn't have no swords in the cane, but we had swords in our hearts. We had swords in our hearts. So as he has him and his family, that's what helped us through isolation. And that's probably what made us a little crazy sometimes.
Oh, can I add something to that? In middle our time, I came in '69, and along with Angela and some others. But I think the difference too in our era, and why we didn't feel some of that isolation is because we probably, when we came in, it was the largest black class admitted to Carolina. So what I don't know, 80, you know what I'm saying? And so we got a critical mass that made the BSM make sense. And so we created our own black community within this sea of whiteness. And so we would come together and we would play bid whist in the union. And, you know, because that's what we did back home. You know, coming from our black communities, from our black enclaves. And I think that made a huge difference for us in the struggle we went through versus you guys. And, but we'd have never got to 80 if it hadn't been for you.
Amen. Amen.
Let me just say that I will tell you, I left Carolina in '67. I returned to take the bar review course in 1971. And it was the difference in day and night. Just that 4 years that I've been gone. But it was like, I mean, being in Carolina when entering in 62, 63 was like being in boot camp. And I don't think I've ever gotten over it.
I wanted to make one comment though, that it may not apply to everybody, but I think it applies to some of us. I think it's important to acknowledge that there is I think for Mel and Joanne, and it may be true for Dr. Hooper too, you all probably graduated with highest honors or something, I think. So I think it is true that for those of us, I'm one of them, who got a degree in the movement along with the academic degree, we did, I think in my case, I can speak for myself, academics did suffer for the learning and expertise that came with the movement work and having fun and the community and all of that and the experience of that.
I think that's great.
And I guess when it's all said and done, I think there's surely significant positive impact. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's a choice, and those choices have consequences. And sometimes I look at the wonderful lives you all have had, and with those accomplishments, those are advantages that we lose in that fight. But that's always been, I guess, a trade-off in the fight for justice. So I don't know the answer, but something I think to acknowledge. Very good.
So McAlpin mentioned that they had a relatively large group of African Americans in 1969. Let me do a quick history lesson. Hopefully everybody already knows what I'm about to share with you, but there's probably somebody who doesn't. So let me share a few quick things. The very first African American students at Carolina came in 1951 as a result of a court order filed by Attorney Floyd McKissick, the father of Charmaine McKissick Melton, Dr. Melton, McKissick Melton, sitting right here. So he was in law school in 1951, and there was a black woman who entered in 1951 because she had applied and was admitted because they didn't realize she was African American. When she came to campus, they tried to, I'm going to say run her off, but were unsuccessful. So she was also in that first group. So for those first 4 years, from 1951 to 1955, there were only African American graduate and professional students. The first black African American undergraduates came in 1955. 3 young men from my high school, Hillside High School in Durham. None of the 3 of them graduated, but they did open the door. David Dansby came a couple of years later and became the first black graduate. And for a number of years, Carolina just admitted just a few, 1, 2, 3 African Americans, until right about 1972. And that's the reason we cut off the Black Pioneers in 1972. That's right. In that group. So 1972 is about when things really began to change in terms of significant numbers of black undergraduates having been admitted to the university. Okay, there's a lot more that we would like to explore. We haven't even gotten into what made these people the successes they are. I'm going to ask each to just give a quick moment or two on that. How did Carolina play into your future life success?
Mel, you on the clock. Just kidding.
I actually think that every bad experience that you have in life prepares you for good things. That was true of just about every bad experience I had at Chapel Hill. My 3 white roommates moving out on the first day got me a graduate student, white student, who didn't do anything other than study. And so consequently, I didn't do anything other than study. And that was responsible for my success at Chapel Hill. Not getting, I'm not sure whether I was the first applicant for a Moorhead, a black applicant for a Moorhead, but I know that no one had ever been selected before I applied for the law school Moorhead. And if I had gotten the law school Moorhead, I would have enrolled at Chapel Hill, just because it was the most lucrative scholarship in America. The question I planted would have given you my reasons for not enrolling at Chapel Hill, because the whole process insulted me and made me go to Yale. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ended up there. So every negative experience I had turned a corner for me in a positive direction, including being separated from my wife for 4 years. She was out at Fisk University having a good time. No, she wasn't having a good time, but at least it let us know, that 4 years let us know that maybe it let her know that all the options she had at Fisk weren't any better than the options she had. There's no negative experience that you have in life. As my mama used to say, if it don't kill you, it'll make you stronger. And I do believe that.
Okay, that did take care of one of the questions that
gonna give you the whole story.
That question came from class of 23 representative and senior marshal Sage Staley. Sage, wave to the group if you would please, all right? Now, all of the other students who are here, if you would please stand and be recognized. Okay, don't want to keep you here too much longer than the posted time. So let's see if I can take maybe one or two more quick questions. Anybody else have a question that you're just burning to ask? Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I did have a question, but don't want to answer it. But there's a book that just came out last year called "The Drinks from the Well" by Keita Kapoor, and it's the story. It's the struggle for racial equality in the nation's oldest public university. So a lot of the stories that have been told are in that, but a lot of them left out. If you want a good read, it kind of takes the covers off Caroline. It's a really good. It's fairly easy to read too. It's a really, and those people have read it. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. This is a really good book.
Oh, yeah.
On "To Drink from the Well."
Good book.
Here's another question. Here's another question that was submitted.
Got a response over here.
I'm sorry, please.
I just wanted to say one thing for the students. I think that what I found from some of the students like in Northern Carolina is they did not take advantage of every opportunity that you have to get ahead or to do things that you want to do that really bring you to the fore. And that, I think, is really critical to take advantage of all these things that you have. And I think coming to dinner like this is one of them. Thank you.
I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking, gee whiz, there are so many people here who need to be acknowledged. Everybody in the room needs to be acknowledged. And I'm looking around and I think, well, certainly all the Carolina grads need to be acknowledged. But as I look around the room, it looks to me like just about everybody here has some Carolina connection. If you ever set foot in a classroom at Carolina, if you would please stand and let's recognize each other. Okay, at weddings they say speak now or forever hold your peace. So this is the speak now or forever hold your peace moment. Dr. Edge, Mr. Edge.
Yeah, it is Dr. Edge.
Dr. Edge.
That's okay. I just wanted to say, every time people ask about the Carolina experience, and I'll say this back here at the table with my esteemed table mates, one of whom is a black pioneer, is that we have a lot to thank you all for. We know that it was hard. Because whenever you first walk into the briar patch, you get scratched trying to clear the way. And you cleared the way enough so that when we showed up in 1972, right after my brother had left, the way was clear for a lot of things to happen. So you start to see us show up in real campus life. So you start to see us in the band. You start to see the first black majorette. You eventually start to see black homecoming queen. The black King. I'm from Raleigh too, but I chose to stay at Lincoln until they forced me to leave. Okay. They forced me to leave. And I still haven't gotten over that. Okay. But we came here with a network that y'all helped us to start. And a lot of what they take for granted now, if y'all hadn't taken the scratches to open the door for folks like Angie and Phil, Charmaine and me to kind of walk through and lay all those bricks down so that they don't even have to think about it. All they got to do is take it and do it. So thank you. I owe you.
We have the first African American to land a mile in 3:57 minutes, and a Trailblazer Award just recently. And also, I represent the charter member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority on campus. I started in 1973, and we fought for that. That was a fight, and now if we were hoping to celebrate the NPHC garden that is on campus, absolutely beautiful garden representing the Divine Nine sorority. So all of your efforts leads us, the door was lots better because we came in 71 as a community. We stayed on South Campus, we embraced each other. We had our Sunday service at the Upendo. We danced on Saturday night, and we stuck together. I mean, I was in mathematics. I was the only black woman in the math class curriculum, and it was one other black male. But still, nothing like what y'all shared tonight. But we knew we were standing on your shoulders, and we sincerely appreciate it.
Can I just say one thing? Because I made reference in my reading to Ronnie Ross, who I have finally reconnected with after and met with him and talked with him. He's doing well. He got his degree from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte some years later, and I wanted him to know that those of us who made a different choice, the student choice versus the demonstrator choice, had such great admiration for him and what he did, because he had never heard that from anybody. It gave me such joy to let him know that we considered him a hero, just as people considered us heroes who graduated and went on.
My classmate, George McDaniel, who did not graduate, said to me on a phone conversation one day about Black pioneers. He said, I think all of us deserve a statue, and those of us who graduated deserve two. and those like Mel Watt, who graduated Phi Beta Kappa, deserve 3, 4, 5.
Who is the first African-American baseball player at Carolina and a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, you know I got to meet that brother because I was the first one who went out for the team and got cut in 1963. So we'll talk later.
There's so much to be acknowledged in this room. My sister, who mentioned that she was one of the founding members of Delta Sigma Theta on campus, opens the door for me to introduce to you all my sister, my blood sister, and your soror, Sue Jarvis, fellow Delta. And my husband, Matt Jones, both of whom are NCCU Eagles. That's right. And my late sister was also a Delta. And that opens up the door to say, let's acknowledge also all the anyone who attended an HBCU, even if you graduated from Carolina, if you attended an HBCU at some point, our teacher taught at the HBCU. Stand up and be acknowledged, please. Probably not many of you know who Mal Good is. I'm not going to even explain who Mal Good it is. I'm just going to say that years ago I heard Mal Good tell this story. He said that in the early 70s, he would go around to college campuses making speeches, and young black militants would come up to him and say, well, Mr. Good, why didn't your generation do anything? He would say to them, well, like what? Well, we marched and we picketed and we sat in. Why didn't you all do that? And he'd say to them, well, let me ask you this. When you all marched and picketed and sat in, did they curse you? Yeah, they cursed us. Did they spit on you? Yeah, they spit on us. Did they put you in jail? Yeah, they put us in jail. Well, let me tell you something. If we had done those things, they wouldn't have cursed us and spat on us and put us in jail. They would have lynched us. We couldn't do the things you did, but we did the things that set the stage for you all to be able to do what you did. So every generation builds on those that came before us. So keep building, folks. Keep building.
Not to belabor the evening, it's been long, but that comment, and from my brother Walter here, reminds me of something that's been on my heart, because I've been sitting here this evening with these students who are here now, and I had a chance to be with Greer, so Jara and Selena and Kiara, and Walter, your comment about the pioneers taken away and being scratched by the briars, right? They are being scratched right now. They're still being scratched. And I hope we never forget that. Because, yes, we need to build on what the pioneers and those who came and even following did, but they need our support today to continue the struggle.
To Princeton, and Melvin Watt triggered this. It's something that happened a few years ago when Michelle Obama was becoming the first lady for the second time. And it touched my heart so. And to hear Melvin give his story about his roommates, Michelle came on and said, when she first went to Princeton, she went into this room, unpacking, and she was first instead of last, like you know. She unpacked her things and getting settled, and an hour later, a white woman walked in with her white daughter, and they met eye contact with Michelle. And as soon as they did, the mother just said, wait a minute, we're going to have to go to the administration office. And she left with her white daughter. They went to the administration, and she told them, my daughter cannot be in the room with that black girl. Fast forward, Michelle becomes first lady. Her mother has died and passed on, so it makes it much easier for her to then reach out to Michelle. And she sends a message to Michelle apologizing for her mother's bad behavior. And the bottom line is, though, she never would have done this had Michelle not been the first lady. And also, she could have been one of the girlfriends of First Lady. And she regretted that then. She apologized for her mother, but Michelle elected just not to respond at all. All right.
I'm one of the first people to say that we know how to drag out events. At the risk of dragging this out, Reverend Nevin, who made the previous comment, was one of our award winners last night. With all of our award winners. For all of our award winners from last night or previous years, please stand and be acknowledged. There are a bunch of them in your eyes. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. All right. With that, I am going to ask Edith to substitute for Judge Hoover. in making some special presentations.
And I've been waiting all evening. Not that, the gifts. Because I got the task of picking up the gifts from general administration, thank you, and wrapping them. And I have to tell you, I was in awe. So that just means I'm going to have to walk to you.
Thank you.
If you want to open it so people can see it, then I'll tell you. Okay.
You wrapped it well.
Thank you. She said I wrapped it well. The gift that was chosen this year, when I saw them, I literally cried. Because it's the portrayal of two young people. And more years than I can recall, Eric McCrae did these paintings for one of the very first, toward the very first, the beginnings of the bar. And these are now classics. I was fortunate enough to get one of the earlier ones, and there were 3, I think, in all, and I broke the piggy bank and bought all 3.
So who is the...
This is Eric McCrae, and I think that's a signed copy. And so I'm just very proud to present that to you tonight. Now, Dr. Johnson, where did you go? I know you are. Mel, where are you?
Yeah. Thank you.
Judge Hoover also, because he knows that for as long as he's known us, Walter and I are constantly fighting. You'd think we were married. But Walter, this is So, we are extremely grateful for your participation here tonight. Again, Judge Hoover apologizes for not being here and wishes you all well. Back to you all.
I'm going to invite Frankie Perry to the podium.
We're going to take care of it.
All right, very good.
Yes, no problem.
Let's see, there are probably just a few other, well, there are a bunch of other thank yous that ought to be extended. But among others, I want to thank the catering staff for their wonderful work. We thank Extraordinary Events and Extraordinary Ventures for the use of the facilities. We especially thank all of you all for coming out. We appreciate it so very, very much. And I know that there are just tons of people and things that oh, Michael Washington, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else? think of something that I'm forgetting. I know I'm forgetting many things, but.
The lovely bouquets that are on your table. Each table is responsible for selecting who will take the bouquet home. Thank you.
It's been a wonderful evening. I'm going to invite Otto White back up to lead us in We Shall Overcome.
Just a quick note here. When I arrived in Carolina in 1961, fall of 1961, Carolina students could go, black and white, could go to the Carolina movies, but not the black town folks. My sister was at North Carolina Central during that period. Civil rights demonstration was going on. There was a lot of white professors and students participating in the struggle. I got arrested on the corner of Franklin and Columbia after Carolina Wake Forest game. We interrupted traffic there. I thought I was going to be taken to jail, as I had been many times in Durham, going to help the Central students deal with situations in Durham. But instead of going to the jail in Chapel Hill on Rosemary Street, which was 1 block away, they took me to Hillsborough overnight and served cold grilled cheese sandwiches from the Carolina Grill, which was one of the places we were demonstrating against. Okay? So we all have to make decisions in our life. I was a BS chemistry major, got a degree, went on to graduate school in the School of Public Health. Okay? The struggle is still going. And so this song is still appropriate. We sang it in 61, and we're going to sing it in 22. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Amen. Thank you.
Farewell for the evening. You know, it's always a risk to give a preacher the language. Dr. Johnson had to make his way back to the full city and asked me to stand in for him, but I wanted to introduce another pioneer that just joined us moments ago, the first black majorette in the history of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Janine Cookie Bell is now let's join our hearts and minds as one. Dear friends, go forth now into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Render to no one evil for evil. Support the weak. Uplift the faint-hearted. Be kind and patient with all. Love your neighbors. Love your enemies. Love yourselves. And the blessing of God Almighty be always with you this day and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Town Talk. I'm Rose Highland-Sharpe, and as always, I hope you enjoy the show. And honey, remember, some way by God's grace and mercy, if you're walking the walk, you'll be on Town Talk. Take care. God bless. Town Talk airs daily at 11 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. and other times noted in the evening on WYBE TV Spectrum Cable 3, Southern Pines, North Carolina, and on Rose Highland-Sharpe YouTube 24 hours a day. It is a service to the community.